So we talk about protocol HTTP. Now let's go delve into APIs and specifically with JSON. And I'm going to be rather fast on JSON itself because I think you are all very familiar because like you learn JavaScript, you learn React, JS, and then React Native. These are all in the JSON style, right? So, but just to highlight a couple of things for JSON, and JSON really stands for JavaScript Object Notation. It's a lightweight format used to data interchange. It's now the most popular data format, right, for web application APIs. It's compared to other formats such as XML, SOAP, YAML, right? They are still in use, but when it comes to APIs, whether it's web APIs or mobile APIs, I think mobile APIs are also using web. So JSON is the most popular format and supported by so many different languages because it's so simple. JSON is text with special notation. Okay, so an example like this, right? So when you write a JSON, always remember to start with the curly brace and then end with the curly brace because it's treated as an object. And then inside the object, the basic element, right, is always a key value pair, right? Key followed by column and then the value. And then of course you put the key in quote unquote, right? And then the value, usually in quote unquote, if it's a string, but if it's a number, then you just do not have to use quotes. But sometimes that value can also be an array. So in this case, the key members is a key, but the value is actually an array. So that's why you use a square bracket, right? So square bracket for array, right? So curly braces is the most common when you want to create an object. And so you always start with the curly brace and with the curly brace, and then key and then value, and then between them it's a column to separate them, right? So and then because this is an array, right, starts with the square bracket and then ends with the square bracket. And now inside the square bracket again, because it's a list or an array of multiple objects, you still have pairs of curly braces to enclose each object. And then inside each object, you still follow the same format of key, value pair, key, value, right? So this is very consistent and should be rather straightforward to understand, right? So this is the JavaScript object notation because it started with JavaScript. And so key value, right? First name, Jacob, very simple. And then you put multiple key values inside an object, right? And arrays are within the curly braces, the square brackets, sorry, right? And what else? And then most of the values, as I said, right? So usually if it's a string, you want to put them in quotes. But sometimes it's a number, right? You just put it, you do not use quote unquote. And so that's very much it, right? Arrays with square brackets. I think that's it. Should not be complicated, especially given your experiences. I don't think I need to spend lots of time on this. Now let's talk about how we process JSON in different languages. We know it can definitely be processed in JavaScript. Very simple. React, JS, no problem. But let's look at how we process JSON in Python. And then later we're going to also talk about PHP and then construct our own API in PHP, right? JSON object. In PHP using the PHP script. So in Python, you use the JSON module. It's already implemented, which can load data in JSON format, can parse JSON arrays and objects, and also give access to specific data elements inside the JSON object, right? So think about this as an example, right? So, Pokemons in a list of JSON objects, and let's say this is the JSON file you try to load, right? Sometimes it's a local file, but it can also be from your API. So you open it, and then you can simply just read it, and in that case, that data is loaded as JSON format. So the notion of this JSON libraries enable you to parse the data, because it will allow you to access not just the entire object, but also specific object, right, within that the data. So you can, because it's an array, right, you will be able to run a for loop to go through each element, each object, and then inside each object you will be able to access the ID, right? The ID here, access the name, right? The type, things like that, right? So it should be rather straightforward. Again, when you deal with JSON, the reason for its popularity is really its simplicity, right? And so it's very to deal with, as you see in JSON, is rather straightforward to deal with these objects. And that's why lots of people use it for APIs, because XML sometimes is kind of too tricky, too much work just to prepare the data object, and sometimes you also have to define the language itself before the standard for your XML before you can start testing. So JSON is rather straightforward. You just create that format and then start testing it. So APIs, as you know, is application programming interfaces, commonly used to retrieve data from servers, to even to be able to integrate different parts of services through these APIs. And obviously, you know that there are third-party APIs available, right? From social media, for different services, right? Twitter has its APIs, and so forth. So why do you want to use APIs? Because it offers dynamic changing data, and data perhaps you don't have ownership of, right? And that can be only offered through other places. Or if you want to offer your data or services as a package and allow other people to license it and perhaps use it, right? And so you can earn, loyalty from it. So, it allows people to package data in services and to be accessed through the APIs. And so there are data of interest from a large data set, related computation that can be done on the server side, right? Think about today AI tools also have as APIs, right? You can use OpenAI's APIs to access the latest language models, right? So these are things that perhaps is the data that is most valuable, perhaps is the computational or algorithm that is valuable, and people want to have access to that, right? And so on top of API, you will be able to integrate the service as part of you. Maybe you want to create a conversational tool for specific domain, and you can say, I want to integrate, like ChatGPT as part of my services. And so that kind of API will allow you to do that, even though you do not have direct ownership of ChatGPT, right? So APIs, of course, also is part of this paradigm of communication for client-server, right? The client is the program that sends a request to the server, right? And then server processes the request and provides a response, which is status and data with header and the actual content, right? And then the client can receive the response and process the data, right? and perhaps render something on the interface on the front end, right? So there is the whole notion of integration using APIs. So with APIs and on the web, you communicate using the HTTP, right, or HTTPS protocols, because these APIs are hosted on the web servers and maybe hosted by other people's web servers. Perhaps you're also going to create your own APIs, right, that will be hosted on your servers. And these are essentially, like, they are APIs, but you can also think of them as data pages, right? These are just like regular pages, but of course, instead of in HTML markup language, you are using JSON, right, to package the data, right? And so to test these APIs, you can use browsers. So browser is, it's possible to just simply use your Safari or your Chrome to test some of these APIs. But sometimes when the APIs involve more parameters and things, it will require a tool. And I actually have posted some tool. I will point to those tools, and we'll perhaps have some fun and using some of these tools to play with some APIs. Okay, so but regardless of what specific API you are using, JSON today is the common data format. Okay, so knowing the basics of JSON is really helpful. Knowing that your programming language or framework supports the parsing and processing of JSON is also very helpful. So Python programming with web APIs will happen in the same way, just we did. Very simple JSON library, and you will be able to have access to the specific data objects. And so when you use Python and other languages, I think the mechanism is still the same. You use the request library for HTTP communication, because everything is on HTTP. And so you want to follow, of course, the documentation of the API, right? And so usually when API is published, along with it is the documentation of it, like what is the access point, the endpoint, right? Where do you access the API? What are the parameters, what they are? And then what can you expect from the API response? What is the data format exactly, right? And so as part of the specification or documentation, they're going to tell you, you should use get, or you should use post in order to request this API, and then what the data, what kind of data will be served in response. So just as an example, this is OpenNotify API. This is just an implementation to retrieve information about the International Space Station, where it is, right? Because it's moving, right? And so someone has implemented data, using data from NASA to track ISS. Okay, and so they have this OpenNotify, and the endpoint is really right here. Okay. There's a slash something. Yeah, okay. So this is actually their access or endpoint. Okay, so this is the URL to access it, and then in Python this is a very simple piece of code, right? You use the request and then get, right? This is essentially sending a get HTTP request, right, to it. Because this one does not require any parameter, so it's a simple, just send a get request to it, and then you are going to get the response back. Okay, and the response, okay, of course, is saved to the response variable, and then from the response you can get a header, and status code is part of it, and so at least you can tell that, okay, this information is available, right? And then when you sometime if it's not available, you'll get a different code. And these are standard, right, HTTP code and the whole data format. Okay, so here you come. So so it also allow you, right, to send your latitude and longitude information to see if that is available for observation from your location. Okay, and so so that is the parameter that you can send. And so when you send the GET request, you can also add the parameter to it. Okay, and then as part of the response, you are going to get all the message, the data from that API. So this is just one example of it. Okay, so you can the data that you get from API is in a JSON format. Okay, and let me see if I have the next. And then this API, and this is part of that organization, it also shows you can also request from a different access point, right, the astronauts, and get information about how many people are there, their names, you know, and again, as you can see, they are in the JSON format. Okay, number 9 people, and then a list of people's names. Okay, so you will be able to access specific pieces of data from the return from the server response. Okay, so now this is kind of directly accessed using JSON. Right? We understand the format. We can parse it. We can parse it on our own. Sometimes other API may be more packaged. So I just wanted to offer you an example of Twitter, right? Twitter API, it is also in JSON, but they are more packaged. And so you can actually use Twitter's library, for example, in Python, okay? And of course, in order to access Twitter API, you do have to register, sign up, and get the key, access key, okay? Because it does require authentication. They don't want like anyone just to randomly access it without limit, right? So you do have to register for it. And then there is the Tweethon, okay, which is the Python's implementation of the Twitter API, which simplifies everything. Again, even if you work with JSON directly, it won't be that complicated. But with this implementation, it makes things even easier, okay, because you can just simply call Twitter and then get something. Very simple, right? So without knowing where the access point is and things like that. So I just want to kind of show you this quickly, saying that they are at the protocol level, you can always use JSON, right, and parse it to access the data that you want and integrate the APIs. But some APIs are better implemented. They are better packaged for that language, and you can take advantage of that as well. So just very quickly to show you the Twitter API. So let me see. I do want to show you a couple of things from the this week's core shell. So we are down here at API resources. So a couple of things I want to show you, and I also want you to download one tool or the other. Either one should be good. So I'm going to show you the link. So you click on the first link, okay? That will take you to a list of kind of available public APIs that you can use. And some you do have to register. So I haven't registered. Like I'm interested in the stock market. Okay, there's a market stack API. It's free. You can register for it and you can start using it. Okay, just for testing and just to know how to program with these APIs. But there are some that are easier, doesn't even require registration, so we can play with some of these later. But this is the first resource I want to show you, and then the second resource is really API testing tools. As I said, you can use browser for very simple APIs, but a better way is to use, these JSON or API testing tools. And I have used Postman for many years, and it's a great tool. But I recently discovered ApiDog, which is also great. Very similar tool. I think it has a subscription version, but also has a free version, each one. Okay, so feel free to download any one of these, either Postman or ApiDog. Okay, and we are going to try it in a second, just to play with some of the APIs. I'm going to use ApiDog, so you know, because this is my new discovery. I want to kind of continue to play with it a little bit. So these tools, the benefit, again, they have a subscription model, but their free version should be sufficient just for the purpose of this class. If you just want to, okay, I have this API that I want to integrate in my project, or I want to create a custom API for my application, and I want to use this tool to test whether this API functions as I expected. Okay, you can use them. So for the free version without subscription, I think you already, I think we are talking about like hundreds of requests that you can do each month. So I think for a small project, it should be good enough. Okay, and it actually, ApiDog even allows you collaboration, 3 members. Okay, which is perfect for our projects. That it allows you to share, okay, the testing and so forth on their platform. Okay, up to 3 members. So so I'm going to I have already downloaded ApiDog, and let me show you the interface. Okay, so, and if you want to follow along, feel free. So this is ApiDog, and let's see if I can zoom in a little bit more. Right, so this is, and they already have a couple of sample API, which is great for me to kind of showcase, and then I'm going to show you a couple of other APIs from the free resources. So let's say, okay, this is the API for pets, right? And that API allows you to find a pet, right? So first thing is like you have this find pet by ID, right? So you click on it, and now, if you want to play with this sample API, make sure your environment, okay, at the top is set to pet store environment, because you will understand the whole settings and endpoints and things like that. Okay, so select that environment, and then to call that is very simple, right? So you have that get, and then for the pet ID, you can simply enter something like, I don't actually know. So 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, okay, as the ID. So enter a value such as 1, and then click on send. Okay, and then the result should be shown down there. Okay, so it's going to show you, okay, ID number 1, the name is Paul, and then there's URL showing the picture. Of course, the URL is fake. It's just a dummy picture. And then category it's a cat, right? The tag, whether it's available maybe for adoption or something. Okay, so that is what it returns. Now, this is the actual body. If you see, it's a body of the data. Now, if your API also takes cookies, or should certain tokens be part of this request, it will also incorporate. I don't think this takes cookies, so it doesn't matter, but there will be a header, right? So the return header from the server, right? So again, it shows you like, okay, what is the date, right? the content type, right? It's pure text, and then it should. I'm surprised it says text HTML because I suppose this actually should be JSON. Okay, but anyway, and let's see. Right, so a bunch of metadata about the return. Now, when you send a request, there's also a header up here. Okay, and of course you don't have special header that you want to provide. You can just let it be so. But if there are additional information such as accept language, right, for your request, okay, you can also specify that. Sometimes you can also kind of send as part of the header whether you want to take cache result or not, okay, or you want to every time you want to get the latest result. So header can also allow you to do a number of things, but in most of the cases you don't have to, unless you know what you are doing. The parameters are usually what you need to change. Okay, so for this pet by ID is very simple, and you also see this is a GET request, right? You see GET, and so you send a GET request for that. But for others, you see there is also a POST, right? So for example, add a new pet to the store. So we can give it a try, right? So it's under /pet, and then in the request you need to provide the name and status, right? So we can put like name Coco adopted, right? Something like that, and then you can click send, okay? And then the server responds. It sends this response. I actually don't know why this is the response, but anyway, okay, so this is more of a simulation environment, so it's not real. And so, like, okay, it's a success or something like that, okay? So that is kind of the API. It allows you to use, again, all these are part of HTTP protocol, because get, post, put, delete, all these are part of the HTTP methods. And when you try to integrate, you should always read the documentation, right, of the API to figure out like where the endpoint is, what the parameters are, what is the response format is like, so that you can process the response from your program, right? So that is for the for this sample API. But we can also give it a try of some of the APIs that I show you here. So see if I can get there. Because some of these at the top that they do require registration. Let me show you this HTTP cat. It's kind of interesting, even though it's a very simple API. Okay, so these are HTTP cats. Okay, so I mean, if you want to kind of instead of giving people a kind of 404, which is kind of people can dread that kind of message, just give them a cat or a dog, right? If they like animals. So okay, and so you see different pictures. Yeah, 404, very interesting, right? Not found. Where is the cat? So this is the API, and of course you can go to. So this usage is very simple, right? You basically use HTTPS and then the status code. Okay, so let's give it a try. This doesn't even take parameters. So you get back, and so how you try is like go back to this endpoint, and then you can click on this new endpoint or plus. Okay, just create a new endpoint. Okay, and then it's going to open a new tab, and obviously you can save this. Okay, after you are done, so that you can continue to use it. You don't have to always copy. So https http.cat and then the C200, right? And because it doesn't require any parameter, we can just click send, right? And then it's shows a cute picture in the return, right? The body is the image, okay? And then okay, so also I think yeah, there's also design mode and debug mode. I haven't really figured out. I just go straight to debug mode, okay? Maybe design mode is different, because when you create API, there is always a design phase. Like you try to figure out the best specification for how this API should work, and then you implement and then you test. Okay, I kind of jump straight to the testing and debugging, and so we can try for 4, right? So you can try any of these, and later, I mean, you can do this after class. Like, okay, if you are interested in the stock market, right, or tracking weather, you can go to some of those APIs, register for it, obtain. I'm sure you are going to get a key, okay, access key, and you will need to provide the access key somewhere, okay. I'm not sure about the exact mechanism, but they are going to tell you in their documentation what you are going to provide. The access key can be part of the parameters that you provide, okay. And so this is kind of a very useful testing tool later, especially for assignment 4, and then when you work on your project, when you need the full integration, right, from the server-side API all the way to the front-end interface. These tools will be super helpful, because the last thing you want is like, okay, without knowing how it works, or without knowing that my API actually works, try to integrate, and now you struggle with is it a front-end problem, or is it a back-end problem, or is it a database problem, right? These tools will make your job much more efficient.